We had two Garth's Los Angeles Chargers who hold the 17th overall pick. Garth, your team made some interesting free agent additions, a lot of good ones as well. You traded for Khalil Mack. You got J.C. Jackson. You signed Austin Johnson from us. You got Troy Reader from the Super Bowl champions. And you got Gerald Everett. I mean, in my opinion, this is an A at worst offseason. A minus, like at absolute worst, but outstanding offseason. And there's a lot of promise heading into 2022 for your team. But I want to ask you, what was your favorite move that the Chargers made?
Ooh, that's a tough one. Personally, for me, it's probably a little bit more an unpopular take, but I think I got to go with Sebastian Joseph Day.
Yes.
I think that he's going to be an absolute monster for us on the interior of that defensive line because, I mean, it's loaded across the board. What we needed most, in my opinion, was, other than a right tackle, was defensive line help because we could not stop a nosebleed when people ran the football against us, particularly up the middle. It was a position that we just did not have a lot of talent at. We were thin, so it was hard to rotate guys, keep guys fresh. So that was one of our biggest area needs, and I think they hit it out of the park with both of those picks, but especially Joseph Day, because he's arguably one of the best run-stuffing D tackles in the whole NFL. He's a guy who's still relatively young and shows to only be improving. He was on an absolute tear this past season before he suffered that injury. So I think that probably was my favorite pick, with J.C. Jackson being second, because that kind of shifts the whole trajectory of our secondary. He can now play opposing number ones, and guys like Asante Samuel Jr. can move back to a more comfortable position and play the slot corner. And also it lets Derwin James just kind of roam the field and do his thing. Brandon Staley's philosophy was that, Derwin is kind of his Justin Herbert on the defensive side of things, and he wanted to load that defense up with weapons around him so that Derwin James could just go out there and do his thing and impose himself upon opposing offenses.
Yeah. Kyle, what do you think? Because I was really surprised. Not only did they add Sebastian Joseph Day, they added Austin Johnson. They improved the teeth of their defense. I mean, Garth was saying Austin Johnson got, what was it, like $6.5–7 million a year?
Yep.
I mean, the defensive tackle market this offseason was insane.
Yeah, I think when looking at this Chargers team from a whole, we'll talk about the draft in just a few minutes, but the Chargers, if anything, watching them throughout the entirety of the season, because they were obviously on a lot of primetime games throughout, Sunday, Monday, and then Thursday. Brandon Staley, I mean, it was like vocalized by almost every single announcer that was broadcasting their games, is they just did not give a damn about the run game. And what does that include? That includes your defensive tackle, just allowing running backs, allowing them to just run right up the middle of your defense. And so they obviously improved on an area of weakness. But when you really look at this team as a whole, Khalil Mack, if Khalil Mack is healthy with Joey Bosa, I can't even think of a edge duo that might be better in the NFL right now. I mean, you might talk about Crosby and Chandler Jones, but a young Joey Bosa and a healthy Khalil Mack, I mean, that is lethal. And then Asante Samuel Jr. with J.C. Jackson. J.C. Jackson has quietly been one of the better cover corners in the entire NFL since entering the league. He's able to pick off some of the premier quarterbacks in the NFL as well. A lot of success in New England. So some stud acquisitions. They really had, Tom, like you alluded to, they had the best offseason, in my personal opinion, out of any team, not only obviously in free agency, but then that trade as well kind of shattered the NFL for a second, the way that all these moves were being made, especially in the AFC West, domino after domino falling, where you had Russ going to Denver, then you had Khalil Mack being a Charger, then you have Tyreek Hill getting traded, then you have Devontae Adams getting traded. All these teams needing to keep up with each other, and they seemed like they added stud after stud after stud. But when you look at this Chargers team from a whole, I mean, I've been very high on this Broncos team, very, very high. But when you look at the most completely well-rounded team, it might be the Chargers in that division, to be quite honest with you. It might be them based on what they did this offseason, and still have a whole draft yet to be done to add and improve upon these pieces.
It's tough. Like, you're in this time of year, like the draft hasn't hit yet, so you can't really pick a favorite in any division. But I feel like every division has a clear front runner heading into 2022, except for the AFC West. So, Garth, as the AFC West expert, who do you think right now has the edge in that division?
Yeah, me trying to be, as unbiased as possible and look at it solely, from kind of just pretending not to be a Chargers fan. I still think that, the Chiefs are the team to beat because they've got arguably the best head coach quarterback combination in Mahomes and Reed. And, they have that experience of being in the playoffs, being in Super Bowls, winning a Super Bowl. Their home field advantage is absolutely insane. It's hard to go in there and win on the road. But I don't think that there's that big, huge gap between them and whoever finishes second like we've had the past 3, 4, 5 seasons. I think that any one of these teams could very well beat them out and win the division. I do like my Chargers' chances a lot for all the reasons that you guys said. We're a really well-rounded team now after those offseason acquisitions. And, the thing that sucks, and I've talked a lot about it with, various people, is that the fact that this division is so loaded, because whoever wins this division, obviously is going to be a very good team, could end up only being like a 3 or a 4 seed because it's going to be so tough to win these in-division games that you could end up having not as good of a record as, they would have if they played in a weaker one.
What do you think, Noah?
This is really tough. Look, no disrespect to the Raiders. I think they have a very good team, but I think they're just slightly the weakest link in this division. I don't think they quite have the rosters or made the moves that the other 3 teams had. Funnily enough, we did like an AFC West, like basically an entire show, like an hour-long segment on who we thought was going to win the AFC West. Garth will probably remember this. I actually picked the Chargers to finish third. That said, that was before they got J.C. Jackson. I think that was a phenomenal signing. This is a guy the last 2 seasons has had 17 interceptions, and he also led the league in pass deflections this season. In my opinion, he should have been the first team All-Pro instead of Trayvon Diggs, but that's a completely different story for another time. And then you get Khalil Mack, and like Garth said, Sebastian Joseph-Day, along with Joey Bosa on that D-line. That D-line is absolutely scary. I definitely think the Chargers have the chance to win. I also think, getting Wilson to the Broncos was big because we all know the potential that offense has at the skills positions. The running back is great, but the question, everyone's had for years, are they ever going to get a quarterback? Are they ever going to get a guy in there that can, lift that offense up? And what do you know? They finally got it, and the defense was great last year. I think they were 3rd in points allowed and 8th in yards allowed, so top 10 unit at the absolute worst. But realistically, I'm probably still going to pick the Chiefs. It's really hard to ever bet against them while Mahomes and Reed are there. I know they dumped Tyreek Hill, but they got so many picks back, and Mahomes will make it work. I think Mahomes is more important in that offense than Hill was. I think Hill will still be good in Miami, but look, going from Mahomes to Tua, that's a pretty big downgrade. So I think the Chiefs will still win the division, but like Garth said, I think it'll be very close. And I'll say this, I'm going to watch literally every AFC West game next season because those games should be prime time whenever they're on. I mean, they're going to be phenomenal. But just because I think they had the most consistency in the past few years, I'm going to pick the Chiefs to barely win the division here.
It's tough, man. I mean, Chargers got some team needs still. I still think the interior defensive line could use a rookie in there. Safety next to Derwin James. Offensive line, especially that right side. I know you got Storm Norton now. And then the tight end position, right? Yeah, I know. That's another thing. Even though you drafted Rashawn Slater last year and signed Matt Filer and Corey Linsley, you still have 2 holes on the right side of the line, in my opinion. I think his name is Braden James or something like that. The right guard, maybe he could be the guy there. I'm not too sure, Garth, but got to ask you, what do the Chargers do at number 17? And what do you want them to do?
Yeah, so this is a draft that, I'm always excited for the draft, obviously, but especially this year, if you had looked at the Chargers before all these offseason acquisitions, I think that obviously right tackle jumps out, and it still does. And then other than that, the other glaring hole that we needed to fill was defensive line. which, like you said, Tom, I do still think that we need to add some depth there. Those guys can't play every single snap. You got to rotate them out, keep them fresh. Injuries happen. But outside of that, there's so many options here for the Chargers. I know that a lot of Chargers fans also would like to see another offensive weapon in there. We've got Keenan Allen, kind of the move the sticks, always make the catch guy. And then we've got Mike Williams, the deep ball threat. But they want to get, a speedster in there to kind of run the same kind of routes that Michael Thomas runs over there in New Orleans. What do I think we do? I think that if Trevor Penning is on the board, we go right tackle. I think that he's probably the only one that might be available still at 17. A lot of the guys that I like and see as first round worthwhile options are going to be gone by that point. If he is off the board, that really opens up the possibilities. We could go wide receiver. We could go defensive tackle, maybe even somebody, like you said, a safety, depending on how the pieces fall. Like I said, I think what the Chargers are going to do, Trevor Penning, if he's on the board, if he's not, probably Jordan Davis, which Noah knows very well, being a Georgia Bulldog, a guy who, despite being on a rival team of mine, I absolutely love the dude. He's insane. It's crazy how fast he moves for his size. So I think offensive tackle or interior defensive line. What do I want them to do? Actually, exactly what I think they should do, because I think that we have enough weapons on the offensive side of the ball. We don't need to use that first round pick on somebody there, especially with, the wide receivers in this year's draft. I don't know. There's some really good guys, but I don't know if I want to put a first round pick into somebody when it's not a huge position of need. So I think smartest decision, most value is definitely going to be a right tackle or interior defensive lineman.
I agree. Kyle, I mean, I know you're big on Jordan Davis, and
Love
so
Jordan
am I.
Davis. If the Giants weren't at 5 or 7, I would say Jordan Davis. If they were in the teens or early 10s, I would say Jordan Davis all the way. But that's the guy when you look at it. When you look at every single mock draft for the last month and a half, 2 months, it's Jordan Davis almost 100% of the time to the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, I do think that he will, unfortunately for your guys' sake, be taken before they wind up picking at that selection, because I think there's a lot of teams like the Minnesota Vikings that potentially could reach, even though they have some good defensive tackles. Another team in there as well, the Philadelphia Eagles, as they do have a couple picks. Maybe in the New Orleans Saints as well, I've seen a potential upgrade at the defensive tackle position. So right before that 17th overall selection, he may be swapped up. But I think Trevor Penning, that was the other guy I was thinking of immediately, especially talking about Storm. That would be an immediate upgrade right away, an immediate starter, swap in and out. Or maybe even with Charles Cross, because that's a guy that's falling. And Noah, I know that you talked about earlier, for the Atlanta Falcons at least, the Kyle Hamilton. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Kyle Hamilton, according to almost every NFL analyst, that's the guy that scouts say is like falling down draft boards. This guy is rated by the NFL as the number one prospect in the draft, but it seems like scouts are not into him. So you want to talk about a value type of pick. I mean, and we saw it a couple years back as well when they drafted Derwin James. Derwin James was one of the best DBs coming out in the draft, and he fell all the way to the Chargers right in the lap. Could you see a potential same kind of instance happening with Kyle Hamilton, potentially to line him up at the safety position with a Derwin James? Very well could be possible. I think 17 might be a little too far for Kyle Hamilton to slide. I think somebody will wind up taking him before that. Yeah. But this is a guy that's gone from a top 5 pick that people are saying he's not going to be drafted in the top 10. So very well could be possible. But I think that, Garth, you talked about it right away. I think that if Trevor Penning is there, that's the guy to go for right away. If anything that I've learned from watching the NFL for the last decade is that if you can't protect the quarterback, nothing's going to get done. And you made a lot of upgrades to solidify that offensive line and to have that one glaring need and to have probably the best right tackle of the draft fall right to your lap, because I think he will be there. I think it might be too sweet to pass up on. So I think they go Trevor Penning. If not, if Jordan Davis is there, which I don't think he will be, if he is there, I'd take Davis. But if he's not there, I'd take Penning.
Yeah, well, there is always that one guy every draft, guys, that, people don't really expect to fall, but they do because there's some kind of lingering injury. A guy from last season that comes to mind for me is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He was projected very high, and he slipped, I believe, into the second round. Went to the Browns. So me personally, if Kyle Hamilton slips, like I don't care if that guy is completely crippled. Falcons should draft him. He'd be better injured than our starters healthy. I mean, that's just the facts to me. But if he somehow slipped that far, I think that'd be a great pick for him. I think the Chargers will nail this pick because their drafting in the past few years has been phenomenal. I mean, guys like Justin Herbert, Derwin James, Rashawn Slater was phenomenal. And look, they believe so much in Kenneth Murray. They let Kazir White, who was one of their best players last season, go to the Eagles. So the drafting is great. Me personally, I think a tackle's a good choice. I think Penning's a good guy. Another name I might just throw out there, maybe a guy like Bernard Ryman from Central Michigan. He's a good tackle as well. Or an interior defensive lineman. And I think Garth is spot on with Jordan Davis. I've always agreed with him. I think that'd be a great guy for him if he did fall that far. He needs to condition himself better. He needs to lose a little bit of weight. You're not going to get away with playing 50% of your snaps in the NFL. That's not going to cut it. So if he could, improve that, the guy play by play, snap for snap is one of the top 3 guys in the draft. I mean, he's absolutely ridiculous when he's on the field. So if he could improve that, that'd be a great pick for them. But improve in the trenches because I mean they made moves to improve the defensive line and the secondary. If they could just plug up that right side of the offensive line, because obviously Garth, he was a big fan of Brian Bulaga, but he was injured the whole season. And Storm Norton absolutely sucked. This guy's like an XFL level tackle. So if they get a right tackle, or I'd say a defensive tackle, they'd be pretty good.
Fun fact too, Tom, before you give your take, Derwin James was drafted with the 17th overall pick a couple years back. So very well could be a Kyle Hamilton potentially, because that was also a projected top 5, top 10 pick, fell all the way to 17 to the Chargers.
Here's my thing about Kyle Hamilton. It's a combination of things. It's not just the injury. He's also a 6'4" safety, so his position is in question when it comes to the next level, similar to what we've seen in Isaiah Simmons and even for a brief time last year, Micah Parsons. So this could be an instance where he does fall out of the top 10. As Simmons fell a little bit, Parsons fell, and we could see the same fate for Kyle Hamilton come draft night, plus the injury that may throw some people off. But it really wasn't a serious injury. It just lingered, and unfortunately he couldn't play the second half of the season. But my official prediction is that Trevor Penning will be a Los Angeles Charger come draft night. Garth, any final thoughts on the Bolts?
Yeah, just that, like you said, Tom, I hope we can get Trevor Penning. Storm Norton, like I've said over and over on the Sweet Tea Show, really awesome name. Unfortunately, terrible player. We've got a very strong left side of the offensive line. Let's not let the right side of the line being so pitiful that, it kind of overshines that good offensive side on the left-hand side. But either way, like I said, I'm really, really excited because of the offseason acquisitions. There's a lot of avenues that we can take, a lot of, different positions. We don't have to just take, one player, one position, or else I'll be mad. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Can I ask you one question? Because this just dawned in my head, and I don't know if I ever asked you this. The Chargers and Lightning are both Bolts, right? Did that factor into the reason why you became a fan of both despite moving to Florida?
Yeah, so Chargers definitely I've been a fan of for a lot longer because I'm more of a recent NHL fan.
Okay.
Actually started watching a lot of hockey the season that they won the President's Trophy and then got swept by the Columbus Blue Jackets. But yeah, I think probably just having very similar designs. I've noticed that my favorite teams across all sports, the similarity is the color blue. So I think those two things kind of played into it. And then just being that it was around the time that I moved down here to Florida, so it was a local team that I could follow closely and attend some games.